Hello there, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The FCC is ready to move forward on the broadband nutrition labels after looking at some petitions from some associations on changes that they wanted. They rejected a lot of those, but they did make a couple of, or they're going to be making a couple of modifications. I will be right back and we'll look at that. Thanks for joining me. Rick Husey here with Broadband Deployment News. So this is the press release. I linked to this as well as to the full document that I'll look at here in the description of this video. But you see here, FCC declines to reconsider rules for consumer access to easy to understand info on broadband labels. And they didn't decline everything. They actually did make a couple of changes that will make it a little bit better for some. So you see here, the FCC today largely rejected petitions to reconsider its broadband consumer label rules as required by the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. And a lot of people forget this, that this was part of the IIJA, that the FCC had to do this. The Commission adopted new rules in 2022 requiring broadband internet service providers to display labels at the point of sale and that disclose important information about broadband prices, introductory rates, data allowances, and broadband speeds, and to include links to information about their network management practices, privacy policies, and the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Program, or the ACP. And point of sale could be, a lot of times that's on the website. That's where people will sign up a lot of times, or that's where they're looking for information. But they may call someone, in which case they could be referred to that information on a website, or they may be in a retail location signing up. So all of this needed to be taken into account. It says, following the adoption of the Broadband Label Order, several petitions were filed asking the Commission to clarify and or reconsider certain requirements. Today's order on reconsideration, which I'll look at in a moment, largely affirms the rules adopted by the report and order while making some revisions and clarifications, such as modifying provider record-keeping requirements when directing consumers to a label on an alternative sales channel, and confirming that providers may state taxes included when their price already incorporates taxes. The rules will go into effect following the legally required review by the Office of Management and Budget. After this Paperwork Reduction Act analysis is complete, the majority of providers will have to display the label within 6 months of approval. Providers with 100,000 or fewer subscriber lines face a deadline of 12 months after OMB approval. And I actually think most ISPs, I believe, are under 100,000 lines. Certainly the large ISPs have the vast amount of customers, but they've got millions, right? So your smaller providers that are operating, in parts of a state, in just a town or a city, maybe some regionals that might have, might have 70, 80,000 lines that they have, but they're under 100,000. So I think the majority of ISPs are actually under 100,000. So they'll have 12 months to do this. But the larger guys, those that are maybe regional, that are covering multiple states and several cities and states, plus, of course, the national providers, will have to get this done within 6 months. So, and that's the press release. And the actual, I was going to show this. So this is what we're talking about here. So this is, let me make this a little easier to read. So this is the kind of thing that we're talking about here, where you've got something that really looks like a nutrition label. I think this is the plan, to make it easy for consumers to compare different broadband service providers. So just like you can go to the grocery store and pick up 2 cans of beans and look at the label on one and the label on other and figure out, well, let's see, how much sugar does this have? What are the calories on this one? How much fat in each? And you can make your comparison. There's nothing about pricing on those labels in a grocery store. You'd have to look, a lot of the grocery stores will have down at the bottom the price per ounce, so you can make a comparison there. But on the nutrition labels, it's really about nutrition. On the broadband nutrition labels, as they call them, it's really more about the kinds of very similar things as far as comparing features and whatnot, but a lot of it's related to pricing. You need to be able to look at 2 different providers and see what they're providing, things like how much data transfer, is it a special promotion, what is the final price, what about other fees that are on there, what does it all total up to, so that you can look at these 2 things and find that information in the same place, so that you're not having to look at one website and they've got different things in different places, and maybe there's an asterisk that directs you down somewhere where you got to read the mice type to find something. This is all supposed to be in the same format, kind of like this. So this is the order on reconsideration. You see this was released yesterday. Just a couple of things I wanted to go over in here on the specific things that they allowed and or rejected. Here you see identifying additional monthly provider fees on labels. It says here, we affirm that providers must itemize the fees they add to base monthly prices, including fees related to government programs they choose to pass through to consumers, such as fees related to universal service or regulatory fees. So the USF fee, that is required. It's not required that service providers pass that on to you, but they do. It's a requirement that they pay that. So, that's the USF fee that you see on your bill a lot of times. So that's got to be clearly delineated on the labels. It says, we affirm that consumers should know both the total cost of service and what goes into the cost to both budget and comparison shop between plans and providers. So not just, you can't even just have an all-in cost that includes everything and say, here's how much it costs, kind of a drive-out price, right? When you're buying a car, you say, what's the drive-out? Meaning, okay, tell me what the taxes are and all the junk fees that you're going to throw in there. When I drive this off the lot, how much is it costing me? It's kind of like that. You can put that on the label, but you got to itemize everything that's making that up. We therefore reject the ACA Connects and others' requests that providers simply state on the label that additional fees may apply and that these fees may vary depending on location. We also reject their alternative proposal that providers identify generally the maximum dollar figure that could be passed through to the consumer per month, rather than requiring providers to itemize each and every fee. So they're really trying to make it so that if you go and look for a provider in your area, you can see all of the fees that make that up and what it's going to cost you. And that's one of the challenges here, is that you've got providers that are providing the service in various locations, and things are going to be different. They've got certain taxes and fees in some areas that they don't have in others. Could be a state tax. I don't know if there's city taxes that get applied to those kinds of things in different areas. Certainly state and local taxes vary based on where you are. It says, moreover, we're not persuaded that a provider will be forced to list on the label potentially hundreds of fees for all jurisdictions in its footprint. Because again, that's the challenge. You're like thinking, we're going to have a label and we're going to have to list every single location and all those fees, when only a subset of fees listed would actually apply to an individual customer. So again, what they're saying is, you don't need to list the fees for every particular situation you might have in every one of the 50 states. You just pick what applies to that local consumer when they're looking at it. We therefore reiterate the labels must be accurate based on the consumer's location. And again, that's going to be a challenge. I understand why some providers are saying this is kind of onerous for us to figure out how to do this. Think about somebody going to your website, you're going to have to, I guess, you just got to identify, maybe get their zip code. They type in their zip code and you've got to have a database that's going to present the data that they need for that location. Describing data allowances on labels. So we affirm that providers should keep their descriptions of any data allowances simple on the label and should only describe data allowance details in their more complete service descriptions in their advertising materials on their websites. We therefore deny CTIA's request that wireless providers be able to use multiple lines of data allowance descriptions on the label. CTIA states that wireless providers offer consumers data allowance options that differ from those offered by wireline providers, and that such data allowance options may vary between handsets and hotspots. We agree that consumers may want to see these details before purchase, but believe consumers are best served by a high-level description of data allowances on the label, that allowing providers to clutter the label with detail about these allowances would undermine the simplicity and utility. So there are two labels, as we were looking at over here. You've got this one is kind of the sample for a wireline provider, and then you've got a sample for a mobile provider. So you've got slightly different information. So CTIA is a Association for Wireless, and that's what they were arguing for, but that was not allowed. Let's see, we sent something else on here. Here we go. Documenting interactions with consumers at alternate sales channels. And I think alternate sales channels, again, would be like an office that you go into. So maybe your broadband provider is the local power company, could be an EMC. And you can go to their website and sign up, but you could also, especially in small towns, people will go into the office to pay their bill. I mean, it's just a small town, so they know the people there. They may go in there to order service, and you need to be able to provide the same kind of information. So it says here, in response to the ACA Connect's joint petition, we reconsider the requirement that a provider must document each instance when it directs a consumer to a label and an alternative sales channel, for example, retail stores, kiosks, and over the phone, and retain such documentation for 2 years. In doing so, we grant ACA Connect's request and clarify, in accordance with such request, The requirement will be deemed satisfied if the provider establishes the business practices and processes it will follow in distributing the label through alternative sales channels, retains training materials and related business practice documentation for 2 years, and provides such information to the Commission upon request within 30 days. So I think what they were originally requiring was that if somebody went into that office to order service, that in addition to making sure that you provided them the information, the broadband label, that you then had to document that consumer was in there, and you had to retain that information, maybe whatever you had provided them, for up to 2 years. A lot of record keeping. So I think that was what they said. Okay, we're gonna bend a little bit on that. It says we share their concerns that creating an additional system by which consumer-facing employees are required to record the details of when and how they share the label in every customer interaction may impose significant costs on providers. We believe that permitting providers to alternatively establish business practices and training materials to ensure labels are distributed consistently and accurately in retail stores and other sales channels will sufficiently protect consumers. And then identifying government taxes on labels. We grant CTIA's request, again, this is the Wireless Association, we grant their request to clarify that wireless providers have the flexibility to state taxes included or add similar language to the label template when the provider has chosen to include taxes as part of its base price. CTIA contends that some wireless providers have chosen to build taxes into the monthly prices that they advertise. So that's a situation where they're saying you don't have to have an itemized tax on there. And it just mentions wireless providers. I'm not sure if this would apply to a fixed wire or to a wired provider like a fiber or cable provider, if they're going to be able to do this or not. It doesn't seem to indicate that. It seems to say that it's for wireless providers that they can do this. They have that flexibility. So they can just have that kind of all-in price with the taxes. They still have to itemize other things like USF fees and other kinds of junk fees that might be on the bill. But as far as taxes, they can just say taxes included if that is in that price. We also agree with CTIA that stating that taxes will apply or that they vary by location where taxes have already been factored into the quoted prices would not be accurate and would confuse consumers and not help them, which is a result the Commission surely did not intend. We therefore make clear that providers may only avail themselves of our clarification when they have included all taxes in their monthly base price and may not rely on general statements that taxes may apply in such taxes if such taxes are not included in the base price. So they've got to say taxes included, and that price has got to include the taxes, or they've got to have it, I guess, itemized and have that exact amount and then the total. So the effective date on this it says the compliance dates for the amendments in this order on reconsideration will be 1 year following the completion of the OMB review and modification of this section here. And again, that's for providers with 100,000 or fewer subscribers, and 6 months following completion of that review and modification for all other providers. So again, if you're a provider under 100,000 lines, under 100,000 subscribers, I don't know if it'd be subscribers. It says lines. I'm thinking that means subscribers. So not that you're passing 100,000 homes, but that you've got that number of subscribers. For you, it's if you're under that, it's 6 months. If you're over 100,000, then then it's 1 year. If you're under 100,000, if you're over 100,000, then you've got 6 months to do that. So you've got a little bit less time, and the bigger guys have the resources maybe to pull this together a little quicker. So that's the reason for that. But again, there's a lot of good size ISPs that are under 100,000 lines. I mean, those are some large providers, and that's a lot of providers. Again, you've got internet service providers that have got under 1,000 customers out there in very small areas. You've got 10,000, 5,000, 10,000, 20,000, well under 100,000. Lots of these independent guys out there are that size. So thanks for joining me. If this was helpful, if you give me a like on the video, I'd appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, click the subscribe button down there in the video. If you hover over it, you'll see it on the video. Just click that. Click the little bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. Appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.